Embarking on a journey through the monumental battles of antiquity, the Battle of Troy, circa 1200 BCE, distinguishes itself as a uniquely compelling conflict, woven from threads of legend and historical fact. Its profound impact resonates throughout Greek culture, Mediterranean civilization, and our very understanding of warfare. Although our primary source remains Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, modern archaeological discoveries at Hazarlik, in present-day Turkey, corroborate Troy's existence as a real city, subjected to repeated destruction and rebuilding. This lends credence to the notion that a genuine historical conflict served as a foundation for the enduring myth. Before delving into the military events, grasping the intricate geopolitical landscape of the late Bronze Age is essential. This era saw powerful kingdoms vying for dominance in the Mediterranean. The Mycenaean Greeks, the Hittites in Anatolia, Egypt under the rule of Ramses III, and various thriving trading kingdoms scattered across the Levant. Troy, strategically perched at the gateway to the Black Sea, held sway over a critical commercial artery linking the east and west. Effective control of Troy translated to control of the flow of trade, wealth, and maritime power within the region. Numerous theories attempt to explain the true origins of the war. Mythology ascribes a conflict to the abduction of Helen, renowned as the most beautiful woman in Greece and the wife of Menelaus, by Paris of Troy. This act, according to legend, spurred Agamemnon to assemble a vast coalition to reclaim her. However, historians posit that economic and strategic considerations offer a more plausible explanation. Mycenaean Greece coveted access to the lucrative trade routes controlled by Troy, while Troy's growing influence posed a challenge to Greek dominance. Furthermore, the traditionally fractious Greek city-states may have briefly set aside their rivalries to pursue a shared military objective. The Greek coalition led by Agamemnon included Sparta with Menelaus, Ithaca under command of cunning strategist Odysseus, Pylus, guided by the wisdom of Nestor, and, most notably, Achilles, the nearly invincible warrior who embodied Greek martial prowess. Their army comprised a diverse force of heavy infantry, light infantry, chariots, and seasoned generals, each bringing their unique tactical approaches to the battlefield. Troy, however, was far from defenseless. Under the leadership of King Priam and his son Hector, revered as Troy's greatest offender, the city boasted some of the most formidable fortifications in the ancient world, imposing multi-layered walls erected over generations. Troy also forged alliances with entities from Anatolia, Thrace, Dardania, and surrounding territories. Its soldiers were well-disciplined, intimately familiar with the local terrain, and adept at employing highly effective defensive tactics during prolonged sieges. Both sides made extensive use of chariots, though with differing doctrines. The Greeks primarily utilized chariots for the rapid transport of elite fighters, while the Trojans deployed them as lethal tactical weapons on the open plains outside the city gates. This disparity led to intense, unpredictable clashes that characterized the early years of the war. The war's symbolic 10-year duration reflects both the mythic tradition and the stark reality of a protracted stalemate. The Greeks endured disease, shortages, and ambushes, while the Trojans faced famine and the constant specter of fear. It was a trial of endurance as much as strength. This section paints a vivid picture of the conflict's backdrop, intricate motives, shifting political dynamics, and two formidable sides bracing for a war that would reshape the course of Mediterranean history. From here, the brutal combat and dramatic events of the siege will unfold in the subsequent sections. When the Greek coalition landed on the shores near Troy, the war did not erupt in a single, decisive clash. Instead, the initial phase was marked by caution, instability, and probing maneuvers. The Greeks, despite their numerical advantage, faced immediate challenges, hostile terrain, and Troy's swift defensive response. The Scamander Plain, the primary battlefield, was characterized by marshes, uneven ground, and limited pathways suitable for chariot movement. This compelled the Greeks to advance in fragmented formations, diminishing the impact of their initial assault. On the very first day, the Trojans launched a surprise attack. Hector, commander and defender of Troy, led chariots and swift cavalry down the northern slope, disrupting the Greek attempts to organize. This ambush was not intended to end the war, but rather to demonstrate Troy's preparedness for a prolonged conflict. Agamemnon ordered his principal generals into fray. Menelaus secured a high ground with heavy infantry. Odysseus managed the flanking guards, and Achilles, as legend recounts, inflicted heavy losses on the Trojans in the earliest skirmishes. Yet, the Greeks were unable to penetrate the city walls. Troy's strategy during this phase was surprisingly aggressive. Rather than remaining behind their fortifications, Trojan forces frequently launched rapid sorties through the gates. Hector, Sarpedon, and Aeneas, and others engaged Greek champions in fierce encounters that transformed the plains into a perpetual battlefield. However, neither side achieved a decisive breakthrough. The Greeks were too powerful to be driven back into the sea, and Troy was too well fortified to be breached. A stalemate ensued. The Greeks constructed a massive coastal encampment, while the Trojans repeatedly opened and closed their gates for swift raids. Alliances soon reinforced both sides. Anatolian allies bolstered Troy, while Greek reinforcements arrived by sea. This constant influx transformed the battlefield into a sustained war zone. One defining characteristic of this phase was the prevalence of hero-to-hero duels. Menelaus versus Paris, Hector versus Ajax, and numerous others. While legendary in scope, these duels reflected genuine Bronze Age warrior traditions, where elite combats were intended to minimize broader casualties. As the conflict dragged on, Agamemnon feared that the Greeks would eventually succumb to fatigue, disease, or internal discord. He prepared a massive coordinated assault, while Hector strengthened the gates, chariots, and elite guard. The first phase of the war thus concluded in a hardened stalemate. Troy unbroken, Greece unyielding. The Scamander Plain became a landscape of endurance and tragedy. In the subsequent section, the conflict escalates dramatically with larger battles, shifting strategies, and the burgeoning tension between Achilles and Hector, a duel that would determine Troy's ultimate fate. As we delve deeper into the heart of the war, the Battle of Troy entered a phase not only characterized by fierce confrontation between Greeks and Trojans, but also by profound divisions within the Greek camp itself. The conflict between Agamemnon and Achilles escalated into a crisis that nearly doomed the entire expedition. When Achilles withdrew from battle, incensed by Agamemnon's dishonorable conduct, the Greeks lost their most formidable warrior. Their offensive capabilities crumbled and morale plummeted. Deprived of Achilles' unparalleled combat prowess, every Greek line became more vulnerable. Troy swiftly capitalized on this opportunity. Hector intensified his assaults, launching bold, coordinated attacks that pushed the Greeks further and further back. The Trojans not only repelled Greek advances, but also threatened their coastal camp, a scenario previously unthinkable. Ajax, Odysseus, and Diomedes fought valiantly, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer pressure defending multiple fronts simultaneously. The Greeks erected wooden walls and trenches to safeguard their ships, fearing that Troy might set the fleet ablaze and bring the war to a premature end. At the height of this crisis, Hector spearheaded a massive offensive aimed at driving the Greeks into the sea. The battle raged across the Scamander Plain. Trojans advanced in waves, their chariots tearing through Greek formations. Agamemnon sustained a wound, and Ajax narrowly managed to hold the line. Fire reached the ships, the final blow that could have irrevocably destroyed the Greek campaign. In desperation, Greek leaders pleaded with Achilles to return to the battle, but fueled by his anger, he refused. Patroclus, witnessing the imminent disaster, requested permission to don Achilles' armor and lead the Myrmidons. Achilles granted his request, but only on the condition that Patroclus would not pursue the Trojans to the city walls. Patroclus' entry into battle instantly reversed the tide. Mistaking him for Achilles, the Trojans faltered. The Myrmidons shattered their lines and saved the Greek camp. However, Patroclus overstepped his bounds. Driven by the momentum of the advance, he pursued the Trojans to the very gates of Troy, where he encountered Hector. The duel ended swiftly. Patroclus fell, and the Trojans realized the truth. They had not slain Achilles, but rather his closest companion. Patroclus' death irrevocably transformed the war. Achilles' ensuing fury would reshape the battlefield and set the stage for the legendary clash with Hector, a pivotal moment that would determine the fate of Troy. Following the death of Patroclus, the Battle of Troy reached its climactic phase. The return of Achilles, the Greek supreme warrior, consumed by unparalleled rage. In Greek culture, Achilles' wrath was not merely personal vengeance, but a symbol of warrior honor and an unstoppable force. News of Patroclus' death reinvigorated Greek morale, while simultaneously shocking the Trojans, who now fully understood the magnitude of the threat they faced. Achilles meticulously prepared for his return, donning the new armor forged by Hephaestus, renowned for its invincibility. He led the Myrmidons with unwavering determination. The mere sight of him on the battlefield unnerved Hector and the defenders of Troy. Their first confrontation occurred on the Scamander plain. Hector fought valiantly, supported by Trojan soldiers, but he could not withstand Achilles' superior strength and relentless assault. The duel culminated in Hector's death before Troy's gates, shattering the city's defensive morale and leaving the Trojans without their central commander. In the aftermath of Hector's death, Achilles employed psychological tactics, displaying Hector's body to demoralize the Trojans while inspiring the Greek forces. Within the context of Bronze Age warfare, such acts were intended to maximize the enemy's fear and reduce their resistance. Greek attacks intensified. Achilles, Ajax, Odysseus, and Nestor coordinated chariots, infantry, and archers in continuous assaults. Troy's walls were under constant pressure. Supplies dwindled, and soldiers grew exhausted from the prolonged siege. The Greeks also implemented strategies beyond the battlefield, cutting off reinforcements and supply lines, further weakening Troy. This phase highlighted Achilles' dual role, not only an unmatched combatant, but also a strategic commander, influencing the outcome to morale and tactical superiority. The confrontation between Hector and Achilles not only diminished Troy's major defensive capability, but also paved the way for the Greeks' final strategy, the Trojan horse. This combination of brute force, psychological warfare, and cunning would ultimately determine the city's fate. Part 4 concludes with Achilles' unstoppable power on the battlefield, and Troy in its most precarious position. The stage is now set for the war's final chapter, where all strategies, cunning, and force converge to seal the city's destiny. Following the fierce battles and Hector's death, the Greeks transitioned to the final phase of the war, where strategy and psychological tactics would ultimately determine the outcome. Under Odysseus' guidance, the Greeks conceived the legendary Trojan horse. It was not merely a military tool, but a symbol of strategic intelligence, patience, and psychological manipulation. The wooden horse was massive, concealing elite warriors within its hollow interior. The Greeks feigned retreat, leaving the horse as a supposed peace offering. The Trojans, believing the war was over, brought the horse inside the city walls. Under the cover of night, the Greeks emerged from the horse and opened the gates for the returning army, initiating a devastating attack from both inside and outside the city. The result was catastrophic. Troy, once proud of its impregnable fortifications, was overwhelmed. Citizens panicked, and soldiers fought valiantly, but they were ultimately defeated. Troy, a city of immense wealth and strategic importance, was utterly destroyed. Ancient epics recount scenes of fire and blood engulfing the streets, symbolizing the end of the heroic age. The war's significance extends far beyond mere destruction. Troy's demise demonstrated that military power alone does not guarantee victory. Intelligence, patience, and psychological warfare can irrevocably alter the outcome. The Trojan horse remains a timeless example of the potent combination of strategy and force. Historically, the Battle of Troy epitomizes the intertwining of myth and reality, war and politics. Troy became a symbol of resilience and the enduring desire for freedom. Greek epics convey core values such as loyalty, honor, friendship, and sacrifice, all woven into fabric of a military narrative. Economically and politically, Troy's fall enabled Greece to control vital trade routes through the Dardanelles, consolidating power among the Greek city-states. However, the prolonged war and the heavy losses underscore the substantial cost of victory. Finally, the story immortalizes individual heroes: Achilles, Hector, Odysseus, and Patroclus. Their skills, determination, and flaws shaped the course of the war and have inspired centuries of literature and art. The combination of strength, intellect, and willpower created a timeless narrative, where victory and defeat offer profound lessons in strategy, spirit, and morality. This concluding section brings the saga of Troy to its close. The legendary city falls. Heroes' enduring memory and strategic genius continues to influence history. The war demonstrates that both military might and intelligence are crucial determinants of success, and that all conflicts leave lasting consequences.